About 99% of the energy in your body is in the form of fat. Maybe 1% or less is in the form of carbohydrate. Diluted protein, now you have to eat more of whatever the food was to get enough protein to not be hungry. All of your addictive, hedonic, ultra taste foods that you're going to overconsume are this nice little mixture of high energy density carbs and fats together. That's your donuts and your pizza and your candy bars and your cookies.
Now, Ted, you are a primary care physician and you have been seeing a lot of patients in your OPD. So if Indian person comes to you, as you mentioned, as we are discussing right now, that there is a metabolic crisis in a Southeast population, which is primarily Indian. So for the fundamental scientific understanding of this, the first principle understanding, I want to know what is metabolism. There are two compartments of energy storage and fuel utilization in our system, the fat and the glucose metabolism. So I want you to simplify for us.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I mean, very simply, humans ingest protein and then non-protein energy. And the non-protein energy can either be carbohydrate or fat. They're both just chains of carbons with high energy bonds, but they have to be stored differently because fat is not water soluble and has to be transported and stored in special cells, adipocytes. But because glucose or carbon chains that are carbohydrate are water soluble, they can be stored more easily in like liver or muscle. So you have these two separate systems in your body, fat and glucose, in two separate storage areas. The reason why evolution has favored fat is because it's lighter. You can have the same amount of calories in something that's 6 times smaller in volume and lighter. That's why fat is kind of nice. Since we have to carry around, humans are basically battery powered. We just carry around all our energy with us. And because fat is 6 times lighter and smaller to store, just the carbons are packed together more tightly. And that's why we like to burn fat. And that's why, you put gasoline in your car, which is basically a hydrocarbon. It's a carbon chains that are more like fat. It's packed very densely. So, gasoline is like 10 calories per gram, and fat that we eat is 9 calories per gram. And so it's just a very high density way to store stuff. And so your body is this dual fuel hybrid engine that can easily switch back and forth between glucose or fat, carbs or fat. And you see humans are omnivores and they can adapt and survive in any latitude on Earth. And when you look at hunter-gatherers, you just see the farther you are from the equator, the more you rely on fat versus carbohydrates. So equator, lots of carbs, not as much fat. And then closer to the ends of the poles, you have more fat and less carbs. But usually you can adapt and kind of burn anything you want in there.
Exactly. Now you mentioned about the adipose tissue, means as you mentioned, there are two compartments. One is the glycogen storage compartment and one is the adipocyte fat storage compartment. Now you had a terrific illustration for this. There were two tanks and there was a knob, which was the carbohydrate oxidation knob, I think, which was the control of the two. So I will pose the illustration in this part. Just let us understand about this, means what happens when we consume primarily a fat-based diet, what happens when we consume highly carb diet, which is our Indian population's core traditional diet. So I want you to explain regarding this.
Right. So because, we have so much more room to store fat energy, about 99% of the energy in your body is in the form of fat. And, maybe 1% or less is in the form of carbohydrate. Because you can only store maybe, 300 grams of glucose in your muscles and maybe 100 grams in your liver. And that's very small amount of calories versus your fat cells. You have way more storage. And so the default is that your body just runs on fat. If you're somewhere with no food and you haven't eaten for 24 hours, all of your liver glycogen is gone. After about 24 hours of not eating carbs, you don't have any liver glycogen anymore. You still have muscle glycogen that your body holds on to for emergency use in case you need to sprint or run for your life. You can get energy from carbs much faster than from fat. That's why it's like jet fuel for emergency use. But the default is that you're just burning fat. So when you haven't eaten for 12 to 24 hours, you're just living off of stored body fat, and all of your basic activities, just walking around and moving and talking, is all being fueled by fat. As you eat carbohydrate, the fuel mixture just immediately has to smoothly change to burning more carbs and less fat. And then when the carbs are gone, you just smoothly change right back. And you have to burn off carbohydrate that you're eating because you don't have very much room to store it. It's oxidative priority, kind of like alcohol. You have no storage for alcohol. So when you drink alcohol, you have to burn off all the alcohol, and all other fuels are not being burned. And then as the alcohol is going away, you smoothly just ramp up burning other fuels that are available. And that's how the system works. And honestly, you should be able to switch back and forth between burning carbs and burning fat without too much difficulty. When you eat a lot of carbohydrate all the time, you really downregulate fat oxidation so that you might just be burning mostly glucose all the time, which is fine if you're not overeating it or if you're super active and doing a ton of exercise. But I do see a lot of people who are eating so much carbohydrate that they're really suppressing fat oxidation. Most people only need about maybe 100 grams of glucose a day to run their body or less, and then they only need about 1 gram per minute of high intensity exercise. So if you're just an ordinary person and maybe you do a half an hour of exercise, you probably don't need more than maybe 150 grams of carbs ever. But the average American's eating 300 grams of carbs a day. So that there's a little bit of a problem where what we see is people eating less and less protein and more carbohydrate. So that's one of the reasons I wrote the PE diet, is just the idea if you trade some of your carbs in for protein, you're just going to automatically be better off.
That despite of traditional and cultural differences between America and India, I think one common theme for the standard American diet and the standard traditional Indian diet is high carb and high fat diet overall. So what happens when we eat high carb, high fat diet? What happens to this system and what happens inside our body?
Right. Well, there's two different things going on there. Well, there's three primary things happening. The first one is protein dilution. So if you just go out into nature and eat some food, you just kill an animal and eat the whole thing, or you find some food in nature and eat it, you're getting a pretty good mixture of protein and then non-protein energy, which would be carbs or fats. If you're on the equator, it's going to be more carbs and less fat. If you're on the higher latitude, it's going to be more fat and less carb. But you're getting a pretty good mixture. Your protein is going to be about 30% of calories. And then there's some sort of carb-fat mixture that's 70% of calories. And it's just varying as to how much sunlight is where you're at. And so because humans need both protein and non-protein energy, there's this protein leverage phenomenon where protein is very tightly regulated throughout hunter-gatherer humans all over the planet. You see this very nice regulated protein percentage of calorie intake. When you eat refined carbs and refined fats, you get protein dilution. So you've diluted protein. Now you have to eat more of whatever the food was to get enough protein to not be hungry. So protein is the most satiating macronutrient. So if I eat a steak, it's 30% protein. I'm going to have an appropriate amount of satiety per calorie. But if I eat, chocolate chip cookies, which might be 5% protein, I have to eat way more calories to get enough protein to not be hungry. And so the big problem with adding refined carbs and refined fats is protein dilution. So now you're literally forced to eat more of that food in terms of calories just to get enough protein to not be hungry. The other thing that happens is you're increasing the energy density. And the way we tell when we've eaten enough food is just by guessing. And so we're used to eating, basically you eat about, 1.5 kilos of food a day. Almost independent of how many calories are in there. You're just going to eat a certain weight and mass and volume of food. And if you've massively increased the calories in that weight and volume of food, you're going to just eat more. You know what I mean? So it would take 20 cups of strawberries to give you 100 grams of carbs. But you could get 100 grams of carbs out of, just 2 slices of white bread. So you're just, and that's hardly any weight. You're still hungry. So, you eat 20 cups of strawberries. You're not hungry for a very long time because the energy density is low. There's a lot of weight and volume and fiber and water, and you feel really full. But 2 slices of bread weighs almost nothing. That's like 60 grams. You're starving. You're still hungry, and you just ate the same amount of calories. So the refined carbs and refined fats are diluting protein, so you have to eat more to get enough protein satiety. They're increasing caloric density, so when you eat the weight and volume of food you're used to, you just ate twice as many calories. And then finally, carbs and fats together give you this hedonic factor where it's just super tasty and delicious. So all of your addictive, hedonic, ultra tasty, hyper palatable foods that you're going to overconsume are this nice little mixture of high energy density carbs and fats together. That's your donuts and your pizza and your candy bars and your cookies. And all of these things are basically a higher energy density carb and fat together. Protein's fairly low. And all 3 of those drive excessive caloric intake a lot. The hedonics, the protein dilution, the increased energy density, because you're used to just eating a certain weight and volume and a certain amount of protein. And the refined carbs and refined fats just completely screw that all up.
दोस्तों ये वीडियो अगर आपको वैल्यूएबल लगा तो इसे लाइक कर अपने सारे दोस्तों से इसे शेयर कीजिएगा। इस चैनल को सब्सक्राइब तो आप कर ही लेंगे। चलिए मिलते हैं।